we need to remember two things. I think it's helpful perhaps to take a step back first and remember we don't use coal and oil and gas to annoy the world. We don't do it because it generates carbon emissions and global greenhouse effect. We do it because it gives us energy, which is what has brought a lot of people out of poverty. Remember, China, mostly with coal, has lifted about 700 million people out of poverty, an astonishing achievement in just 30 years. So the reality is a lot of people want the same opportunities. It's not surprising that they don't just worry about global warming. If a big UN survey showed that they actually worried the least about global warming, what they worry about is the fact that their kids don't have good food, that they don't have an education, that they die from easily curable infectious diseases. So we need to remember there are many, many other things we also have to solve and spend money on. But that doesn't mean we can't focus on fixing global warming, but it means we need to focus on fixing it cheaply. Mr. Randos talks about it would be wonderful to get everyone to move off fossil fuels. Yes, but it's exactly not going to happen as long as green energy is more expensive than fossil fuels. And that's why we need to drive much more through innovation. If we can get green energy to be cheaper than fossil fuels, everyone will switch. We're not there yet. But that's what Bill Gates and many others, Obama as well, was focusing on the sidelines of Paris, dramatically ramping up investment in green R&D. If we can innovate the price of green energy down, we've fixed the problem. If we don't, we will never convince people to spend a huge amount of their money on solving global warming.
It is true that there are great costs attached to some of these changes that people might make. Jürgen Randers, if I can put that point to you, isn't perhaps part of the problem that we're talking about very long periods of time here, scientists like yourself working on this for your entire career perhaps, whereas politicians are only in office for perhaps 4, maybe 5 years. If we look at the presidential terms in countries like the United States or France, isn't it perhaps a paradox? It's almost impossible to get politicians to think long term, isn't it?
Yes, it is. But I think it's important to understand how small the additional bill is. You know, Mr. Lomborg is arguing that we should wait until renewable energy gets cheaper than fossils. I agree that at that time it will be simple to accelerate the introduction of wind and sun. But if we wait that long, you know, the world will warm, you know, too much before we get to the action. So the real challenge at this point in time is to try to convince the ordinary voter to pay the extra cost. And the extra cost is of the order of 1% of the income of people in the Western world. So if people were willing to increase taxes by 1% roughly, and that 1% was used to introduce the more expensive wind and sun, and we did this for the next 50 years, it would solve the problem. I was once the chair of the Royal Commission in my country of Norway that made a plan for what it would cost to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Norway sufficiently to keep below the 2 degrees centigrade goal. And the cost was actually 250 euros per Norwegian per year to solve the whole problem. The same calculation can be done for France, and the same bill is the same. You know, that it will cost of the order of 300 euros per Frenchman per year to solve the problem. And I think French and the rest of the rich world ought to do this, even while renewable is more expensive than coal, oil and gas.